Yeah, I've got it. It appears to be working now.
Yeah, I just got a text. We're good.
Okay, good. Well, sorry for the inconvenience. But yeah, it's the message is you need to hit the play on the YouTube link. So if somebody hadn't done that, that may have been the problem. But anyway, we're now good to go. We've gotten the issue of Mr. Durbin's model files resolved, at least for now. So we now have to proceed with this question of what to do with the schedule going forward. And I just want to say what I said before. I'll say it again. Let's not lose perspective here. We are not going to try to predict how Sigma is going to be implemented over the next 2 to 3 decades. I mean, we may have scenarios in some context, but clearly it's impossible for us in this proceeding to predict with detail how Sigma is going to be implemented. But having said that, I do want the report to provide some context of what measures would be necessary, and particularly the magnitude of measures that would be necessary to achieve the flat gradients in the local model area for Sigma implementation. So that's the context. I was hoping that the scenario D would provide at least one model scenario. And as I said to Ms. Nelson before our break, she or probably her, but whoever the most qualified witness is for MCWD can provide context of, this is one scenario, but there are other potential mixes, and provide some quantitative analysis of the amounts involved without doing additional modeling. So sometimes it's good to step back from modeling and think about what's really going on, and that can help answer questions. So with that, we've had the introductory comment from Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Brochard, your hand was up earlier. Do you still want to respond, or can we move forward at this point?
I had more just a question from you. You had said before lunch to just have the attorneys come back to talk about scheduling. So we don't have Ms. Nelson or Dr. Kincaid on the line. Did you want me to try and get them?
I don't think we need them. If we do, I'll let you know. And I do appreciate their participating this morning. So let's just dive in. Maybe we can resolve this pretty quickly. So I'll just, since you have the floor right now, Mr. Brochard, I'll ask you, during the break, were you able to develop a proposal for a schedule, at least from Marina Coast's point of view, that makes sense here?
Marina Coast, we're very concerned about the tightness of the scheduling and the timeline. And we don't want to be committing to exchanging models until the models are calibrated. And we know that they're not, no additional work is needed. And we don't know that that's going to happen this week. I think our proposal would be to have another status report and perhaps a status conference on Monday with a tentative of exchanging the models, the calibrated models, on Tuesday, which would be the 23rd, with the hope that we could keep the June dates. But at this point, after having talked with our experts, we're very pessimistic about keeping the current schedule.
All right, well, so there's something I need to understand here, and I'm going to ask Mr. Durbin, because he's probably the most qualified person on our call right now to answer it. The schedule, and I'm sorry if I keep looking to my paper, but I've got to look at the notes here. The schedule was for the calibrated local model files to be submitted on May 16th, which you've proposed moving to the 17th or 18th. But what do you need? I mean, Mr. Durbin has already done the calibrated regional model files, and as I understand it, has run the regional scenarios, and that there potentially are some adjustments to the, I'll call it the D scenarios, that are necessary. But how is that going to delay the process for exchanging the calibrated local model files?
Well, my understanding is the experts are still building and calibrating those local models. That's what's been happening this whole time. We've been using some of Mr. Durbin's outputs as boundary conditions for the calibrated model, and those scenario files is a separate issue that will come later. But right now it's just about getting the local models completed and calibrated to a point where the, expert teams are confident in the calibration and the criteria that they've met, and that they're, going to be useful for the questions that we're asking of them. And that process is just not done yet.
So, Mr. Durbin, are your output files from the regional model necessary for the calibration process for the local models?
Yes, they have to have the current conditions, boundary conditions.
Okay, so what I'm to try to cut through this morass, and I'm not being critical. This is complicated. And I know you're all doing the best you can, but it sounds like, and somebody can correct me if I have this wrong. I don't know whether you need to bring in your technical experts or not, Mr. Brochard. But it sounds to me, from what I've heard, that Mr. Durbin and Ms. Nelson need to talk and hopefully reach consensus on some model run of the regional model that's sufficient to provide the outputs from that file that can, for scenario D, that seems to be where we have an issue, that then can be input into the local model files to calibrate them. Is that the current issue?
No, those are separate issues. They don't need, I think Mr. Wilkins misspoke earlier. You don't need the scenario runs for the calibration, although it's possible as you do additional analysis on your model, you may find ways to improve it in certain areas. The number one goal is to just get a calibrated model. And I think they have Mr. Durbin's boundary conditions to do that, but it still takes time to calibrate the model.
You mean, when you say the model, you got to be clear.
I mean, I apologize. I mean, calibrate the local models. So I think
Okay.
Dr. Ye is working on his local model and calibrations. I know Dr. Kincaid and his team are working on calibrating our local model, and they're just, we're not complete yet, and we're not ready to exchange.
Okay,
That's
so
the number one issue. And then a secondary issue is the scenario D thing. They're two separate issues.
okay, well, thank you. So you don't need anything more from Mr. Durbin right now. Your technical experts don't need anything more from Mr. Durbin right now for the local model calibration process. Is that correct?
Not for the calibration process. I think Ms. Nelson will have additional conversations with Mr. Durbin about the scenarios, which will be necessary for developing testimony, which is, again, also, we're all on the same timeline,
Right.
which is very compressed, and which is why I'm pessimistic about it.
Okay, well, so did you, while we've got you on the talking before I turn to the others, what is a reasonable schedule for completing the calibrated local model files that were supposed to be filed tomorrow?
We've been talking about, reasonable schedules for months now, and it's really hard to predict the problems that are going to come up until they come up. So that's why I was suggesting having another status conference and another joint statement on Monday. And
All right.
hopefully everyone will be done then. But even if the models are calibrated then, I don't know if the current schedule, there's enough time to complete everything that needs to be done under the current timeline.
All right. All right, well, hands went up. I think Mr. Leffler's hand went up first. So I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Leffler, and then shift back to Mr. Donlin. Go ahead.
Well, so I think this was finally clarified, but I want to make doubly clear that for the regional calibrated model files, those were provided on May 1st.
Okay.
That is all that's needed to develop the local calibrated models, which are due, tomorrow or the next day, or, someday this week that might be proposed. So, and I think we need to hear from Dr. Ye on this as well. But, my understanding is, we're on schedule to do that. He's been working on it for the past couple of weeks. And so, all this, discussion of scenario D and so forth, it doesn't have anything to do with that. So that particular
Well, and just
line
so
item.
we're clear, I've been confused about that, and Mr. Brochard said that. So we're now on the same page on that. So that is
okay.
good.
Yeah. And so, anyway, just want to reemphasize that, those from the regional model output standpoint, those files have been available since May 1st. And so obviously I'm not privy to what issues they may be having on the other side, but I think we should, let Dr. Ye chime in on that since he's doing that work on our side.
Okay, so Dr. Ye, your hand went up and Mr. Leffler has referred to you. What would you like to say about this issue?
Yes, first of all, I want to correct Mr. Leffler. The construction of the model is not last a couple of weeks. We started the steady state model calibrated model construction several months ago. Including the model layers, the pumping, the recharge, then also the proposed target wells for model calibration. It's like, happening several months. The only thing we needed to complete the model is really the boundary condition from the regional model. Then we received that, from Mr. Durbin on May 1st. So then, you just get the model calibrated. So we haven't heard, anything to delay the schedule for local model calibration. Even the last meeting, last hearing, early May, So, yeah, I don't know what reason, to postpone the exchange of a calibrated model.
Okay, so thank you. And that's, Mr. Brochard, I think that's the story, that your experts got the output files from Mr. Durbin on May 1. We didn't, but you all did. And you've had it for that time. And you don't need anything, they don't need anything else to calibrate their local models. So what's going on here?
They're working on calibrating it. And it was my understanding from our meet and confer with Mr. Osias last week, which led to the joint report, that CalAM's team was also working on calibrating the model and needed more time. That was my understanding. The more time you have, the better model you'll have.
Maybe I should have just taken up your invitation from all of you to not have this status conference. I seem to be creating more problems than I'm solving today. But the email from Ms. Meisenheimer was proposed May 17 for exchanging these calibrated local model files. So I don't know, Ms. Meisenheimer, I guess I'll put you on the spot here. That's what she said on Friday. Has something changed since then?
Yes, it's my understanding that it has, and that, look, I think we're putting these deadlines and saying we're going to try to hit a deadline. But the problem we're running into is that when you're calibrating, you don't necessarily know how much time the calibration itself is going to take. And so when we did the status conference on Friday, it's my understanding that we were hopeful of being able to meet the Tuesday deadline. And again, I think we don't want to get down into the weeds on some of the problems that were identified, and we want to give Ms. Nelson a chance to talk to Mr. Durbin to sort it out. But I think there was a lot of time diverted into.
Wait, that's where I got confused before. As I understand it, that's to talk out the scenario modeling for scenario D, not the calibration issue that we're talking about now. So I don't want to get those mixed together again when you all, Mr. Brochard in particular, told me we need to keep those separate. So am I missing something there?
Again, and my apologies, I don't mean to suggest that they are the same issue so much as that having those issues arise, there are a finite number of people working on this. And so it did divert some resources over the weekend. But I think where we are is that Dr. Kincaid and his team are working very hard on the calibration, but they need a little bit more time to get it calibrated to the point where we want it to be for the exchange. And again, I think it's of the utmost importance to everybody that we get a well-calibrated local model on each side. And so I think what we need to do is push that deadline back, the exchange deadline. It may be that some of the other deadlines don't need to slide as much. But what I'm hearing is that we do need a few more days to calibrate the model. And my understanding is it's a very, very complex thing, and that we are trying to build these groundwater models in a short enough amount of time that this is fairly atypical in terms of how long it would take someone to fully calibrate a groundwater model. But that's my understanding of the current situation.
Okay, well, and again, this is, I maybe it's too bad that Dr. Kincaid and Ms. Nelson aren't on. Actually, why don't you, Mr. Brochard, can you see if you can get them? You offered earlier to get them if you could. I've got to figure out what to do here, and I'm getting frustrated, and I don't want to do the wrong thing here. So while we're on the Marina Coast, City of Marina side, Mr. Wilkins, your hand went up. What do you want to say about this?
Oh, I, in general, was saying that I feel like our experts should be here for this discussion.
I do too, and I think Mr. Brochard is going to try to get them.
And hopefully they can join. But unlike KLM, we were building a model from scratch, whereas we didn't have a model built, and we were waiting for a lot of inputs. It's not just boundary conditions, and Mr. Durbin can correct me if I'm wrong. And again, I hate to speak for the experts, but I know recharge, I believe we're getting that from Mr. Durbin's model also. There are a number, at least a portion of it. And there were a number of issues that we had to work through. So I know our experts have been working literally round the clock and weekends. They do have a couple other clients that they have. I'm sure most of people do. But I know they've been working very hard, and they've told us that, yeah, we feel we're in good shape and in many ways, but that we need, we spent so much time and resources for our public agencies here that we don't want to turn over something when we know 1 or 2 more days would make it a much better product to answer the questions that you're asking us to answer. And that is what our experts have told us is, could we do something? Yeah. Would we feel good about it? No. So, it's an answer. I mean, and this is where you need to hear from the experts. They believe additional time at this point will make a much better product. And we've invested so much time and energy in this, even though we all want to be done, that they feel they need that extra time. And so I in no way want to suggest or to be that we've been sitting around not doing anything. They've been working around the clock, and they're doing it. So I think you should hear from them, but it's not a situation where we are conflating model D scenario with the calibrated model. And I see that.
I think that was something I was confused about, but I don't think anybody else was confused.
And I probably misspoke, or it came out what I was trying to say wrong. But I see Dr. Kincaid's on now, so I will shut up.
Okay, so Dr. Kincaid, we'll give you a moment to acclimatize here before I call on you. So let's go with Mr. Donlin. I can't remember whose hand went up first, but go ahead, Mr. Donlin. And just so we're clear, I get the fact that Marina Coast and City of Marina had to build a local model from scratch where CalAm already had one. I also understand that Mr. Durbin gave all the regional model output files on May 1st. So there's been some time to input those into the Marina Coast local model for the calibration process. So I understand that's where we are. So I don't know, let's see, where did you go? Mr. Donlin, sorry, my screen keeps moving around. What, do you want to say something first? Go ahead.
Yes, but I saw Mr. Ye's hand go in the air, and I think it's better for you to hear from our experts.
Okay.
I will say that I was in the meet and confer last week with Mr. Brochard, Mr. Wilkins, and others. And then we talked about this, and we agreed to ask for 1 day. I think you asked the right question earlier. What's changed in the last 4 days since we made the request? And to our knowledge, nothing has. More time would be better for everybody, but we're under a compressed schedule. Our folks are ready to go. Mr. Ye built a new model as well. This isn't the same model that we were using. This is a steady state model. So we're starting in the same spot as Marina Coast and Marina. If I could, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Ye though, because I think
Yeah, so
you'd rather
Dr.
hear
Ye,
from
do you
him.
have, you explained earlier about the process. Do you have something to add about that? But go off mute so we can hear you. You're still on mute. There you go.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's really to respond to Mr. Wilkins' comments. Yeah, you know, like this steady state model, it's really like a new model because you need to modify all the model layers and incorporate the groundwater pumping and recharge. I think for the steady state, you know, right now, the groundwater pumping, it's like by the pumping wells, not like by previously the finite element node. Also recharge, also by using the recharge package, you know, by different land use type. We also add like the river package to simulate streambed population. So it's pretty much a new model. And however, all this like groundwater pumping, recharge, you know, Mr. Durbin already provided to both parties several months ago. The only thing left is really the boundary condition, the GHB package. And also this model only take like 30 seconds to run. So you can run the model almost 3,000 times per day using one computer. So
that would be a lot of different inputs to run it 3,000 times a day. I'm being a little bit facetious here, but thank you.
So that's my comment.
And I certainly, that was one of the reasons we shifted over to steady state instead of transient, was so that these models could be run quickly. So thank you. So Dr. Kincaid, sorry that you got called back, but we need you to tell me what's going on. So here's the situation. The order I issued on May 3rd directed the parties to exchange the calibrated local model files and submit them to the AHO on May 16, which is tomorrow. I got an email on Friday from Ms. Meisenheimer, which was the result, and I'm not just putting her on the spot. It was she was the reporter from having talked with everybody in a meet and confer session and said they wanted one more day for the exchange of the regional models to May 17. I made what in hindsight was probably a mistake and continued to have the status conference instead of just issuing an order with that date as the parties had all proposed. And now I'm hearing, I heard this morning, Mr. Wilkins saying maybe the experts need till May 18th to exchange the calibrated local model files. And now I'm hearing they don't know how long it's going to take, and it could be longer. And of course, we all know very well that the longer it takes to exchange the calibrated local model files, that's going to affect the scenario files and the written testimony, which currently is due on May 30th. So what's going on here, and how can we cut through this and get to where we need to be?
Okay. Well, sir, I can tell you, or what I'd like to do is tell you what I conveyed to my team and to my clients, and that is that we are still in the process of calibration, and while I believe that we can continue working on it forever. I said that I'm currently not happy with where we are at with calibration. I think that we could probably get there. We may be able to get there by the 18th, and we're working as hard as we can to get where I think I would be happy with it. then that stemmed from that conversation stemmed a reality, which is that there are other people on our side that are waiting on me, so to speak, on my team to complete calibration so that they can run the fate and transport analyses. And they're very uncomfortable with the idea that they would be put in a position to receive a model that I consider to be calibrated, that then they will have to rely on to do their work without having any ability to provide feedback to me in terms of whether they agree that the model is acceptably calibrated. And so they suggested that they really, wanted to be able to have some feedback and some iteration time on that. And that originally we had thought that, there would be that opportunity. But as the schedules keep getting more and more compressed, time for things like that becomes impossible. So that then what was also expressed is that we're very cognizant of the fact that we make promises and then, have a hard time keeping those promises. And so the ultimate conclusion was that if we were in I don't even want to call it an ideal situation, but under a normal situation, we would have the opportunity to get to what I felt was calibrated and then present that to our side, have a opportunity for feedback and corrections if needed, before that we came forward. And so I think it's not necessarily a reflection of the fact that we're in a bad place or in a place where I don't think we can get to something that's called calibrated, but that we're uncomfortable with the idea that we make a promise and then might ultimately see a problem that'll take yet another day or two or something like that to resolve and be in a position that we're at now. As to the rest of the timing for the hearings and everything, I can't speak to that, but that's on the technical side, that's where we're at.
Okay. Well, and as always, I appreciate your candor. And that is helpful. And, I have a schedule I want to meet, but I don't want, Dr. Kincaid, I don't want you to testify the next round of hearing. You did the best you could, but you're not comfortable with the results. And if you'd had more time, you think you'd be able to do a better result. Of course, you may not know, but that concerns me more than anything else. I mean, I just don't want to sacrifice that level of quality here. I mean, this is pretty darn fundamental here. You've got to have a calibrated model that you're comfortable with. I mean, Cal-Am's been pointing a lot of fingers here. I could point fingers too. We talked about this back in January and so forth. But I've done some modeling. I know I've done some simple modeling, and I know how complicated that is. And you're, of course, doing much more complicated modeling here. So thank you for that. So this is what I'm going to do. And I don't know, does anybody have anything else they want to say, or have we beaten up these issues about as much as we need to for today? I think we have. So what I'm hearing now from Dr. Kincaid is you're working hard. You don't want to give me a specific deadline because you're concerned about making promises you can't keep. And it's not just you, of course, it's you and your whole team and so forth. And I get that. Is that a fair statement of what you just told me, Dr. Kincaid?
Yes, sir. That's a fair statement.
I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's pretty close. And and I want you to have something that you're comfortable with. Just what I want Dr. Ye to have. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the local model runs that matter. Of course, the regional model provide the inputs for the boundary conditions and other factors, but the local models are what is going to matter for answering the court's questions, which of course is why we're all here. So I want each side to be comfortable with their local model and their answers, so that then, as I've said many times, I can isolate the differences in model assumptions and what those lead to differences in results. I mean, I want the differences in the results to be you tell me based on differences in model assumptions, not something about, I'm not sure I got my model calibrated right. And then, you know, my staff and I can go forward and evaluate which model assumptions we think are more appropriate, and therefore which model results we think are the ones that should be in our draft report to the board and the board's final report to the court. So having said all that, I think what I want to do is, for right now, I'm going to change the deadline, and I'll send out a new order on this. I'm going to change the deadline from my May 3rd status conference order. A was a May 11th deadline for Mr. Durbin to complete all the regional files. And I better just back up one step, but does everybody agree that deadline has been met? Yes. Not hearing any disagreements. So
no, it hasn't. I'm still waiting for something from Mr. Durbin.
Oh, that's because that's for scenarios. That's different from calibration.
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Durbin, I have to revise all these deadlines. So Mr. Durbin, do you have anything to say on what's a reasonable schedule for modifying the deadline for you to complete the regional model files for the scenarios after you're conferring with Ms. Nelson? Can you answer that today?
Of course, this may not be an answer you like, but it depends upon the outcome of the interactions between Ms. Nelson and myself. But I would think that tomorrow or the next day we could have this all resolved.
Okay, and I understand that qualifier, and I hope that both you and Ms. Nelson have heard what I've said about let's keep in perspective why we are doing these Sigma implementation scenarios, which is, I'll just say, for some kind of a general understanding for our report to provide to the court, and certainly not for a definitive prediction on how Sigma is going to be implemented. So I'm going to tentatively put May 17th for that. I'm going to tentatively put May 18th for the which item B in my order, which was the calibrated local model files. And I'm going to tentatively put May 31, which was one day later for item C, and June 14, which is one day later for item D. Right now, nobody's asking for any other changes. And incidentally, Mr. Wilkins, you made a comment this morning about whether direct testimony needs to discuss the other side's model assumptions. And I went back and looked at my May 3rd order, and I think that reference on page 3 was to the summary slides that I think should summarize the points of agreement and disagreement, including model assumptions and so forth. But I don't think I've ever said that your witness's direct testimony needs to discuss the model assumptions from the other side, because you wouldn't really have the final word on that until you've seen their written proposed direct testimony. So anyway, so we'll leave then E, F, and G on page 2 of the May 3 order will remain the same. And we'll have that hearing. Now, if anybody says that they don't think they can meet any of these deadlines because of basically needing more time to interact with the other side's technical experts or to just complete the work, and I'm counting on all of you to proceed in good faith to do this as expeditiously as you can, and not to nitpick, but to really, focus on where you have real substantive areas of disagreement. I have confidence you're all doing that. So that's my plan. But if you come back and tell me that any of these deadlines cannot be met, then I am almost positive that means we will have to have a revised schedule and we will have to change the hearing dates to the July 17 to 21 backup dates. Because at that point, if these deadlines can't be met, I just don't think we have time for everybody to complete what they need to prepare for the hearing. So that's what my order is going to state. And we'll have to go forward that way. Now, again, I understand this may have some conflict for some of you regarding the hearing dates, but I just don't think there's any other way to go forward. So that's my plan for the order. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, I will get that order out either today or tomorrow morning. And then just as a reminder, Mr. Durbin, please work with Mr. Donlin to get the May 1st files uploaded to the CalAm exhibit folders so that my staff can process those. Okay, Mr. Wooldridge, Ms. Graziano, is there anything else you think we need to cover today?
I have nothing.
Okay, and as I said before, if Ms. Graziano has problems with the files she receives, then I will ask her to set up an impromptu or short conference call with the technical experts with at least one attorney from each side. I don't think I need to be involved in that if that happens, but just to work on processing those model files. So I think that's the best way to proceed. I know you're all trying hard to do the best you can, but I think this is the best compromise I can have between keeping on schedule, but not sacrificing quality. So anything else for today? Oh, and we will set another status conference. I do think it's important. These can be short, but I will ask you to submit a new joint status report on, well, since the deadlines are May 17 and 18, I'm going to ask you to submit a new joint status report on, shoot. It's either May, I'm thinking of having a status conference on the afternoon of May 23rd. So would you rather have your joint status report be due on the 19th or the 22nd? I'll make it the 22nd just to give you a little breathing room. So we'll have it, and then we'll target another status conference on the afternoon of May 23rd. Okay. So, oh, Mr. Moore, your real hand is up. Go ahead.
My real hand, yes. Mr. Lilly, this is something I think has been brought up before, but I believe the hearing officer to take your place eventually is last name Kenzie. Is that right? Am I right about that?
It's Nicole Kinsey, yes.
Yes.
She's my new
I just like
supervisor.
to make the suggestion, considering all this is kind of moving along, that she be invited to any conference, any status conference, any hearing that we have going forward. So when this all ends, whenever it's going to end, and I know it's difficult, no one to blame, but when it does end, she'll be up to speed to a certain extent.
I can tell you, I'm not positive. I'm almost positive she's been listening into all this on YouTube and will continue to do so.
Oh, okay, well,
For
good.
just that reason.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, it's a good point, and she already thought of it. So thank you. All right. Well, thank you all very much. I hope you have a good day and a good week, and please proceed, and we will get the order out, and I'll plan to talk with you next Tuesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.